Two men, one with a wild face tattoo and another who was featured on the U.S. Marshals Most Wanted list, are finally in custody. And they are accused of gunning down a rapper inside of a nightclub in Miami. I'm going to analyze the case and the huge amount of effort it took to get here with a retired FBI agent. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. These are the two men we're talking about today. 37-year-old Deshawn Davis and 38-year-old Guerby Francois. Miami police believe that these two were involved in the shooting death of rapper and music producer Lowell Grissom, known as Young Low or just Low. Now, Grissom, who is originally from California, is best known for his work with Chris Brown, but according to his LinkedIn, he'd also done work with Drake, Lil Wayne, Ray J. And we go back to 4 a.m. on May 7th, 2023. This is when Miami Beach police get a 911 phone call that there have been shots fired inside of the Gala Miami nightclub. This is an upscale lounge often frequented by celebrities and the like. So first responders arrive and they find 3 victims, all with gunshot wounds. Grissom was taken to a hospital, but he died on the operating table, his mother told local affiliate WPLG. Really, really sad case. Lowell leaves behind a young son. Again, senseless tragedy. And you have 2 women who were also injured in the shooting, but they survived, thankfully. And now we have 2 men who've been arrested. And the most recent is Francois, who actually has a tattoo saying, believe it or not, Woopty Woop on his face. Talk about a very distinguishable characteristic. All right, I want to bring in special guest to talk about this. Retired FBI agent and president of Chronos Investigations, Colin Schmitt. Colin, so good to have you. Going to walk through the case with you. Just your initial impressions about this so far.
Well, it's unfortunately, this seems to be a common behavior in that industry based upon what we're hearing about Sean P. Diddy Combs and Tupac and the other ones. And it appears obviously there was a huge disagreement between the victim and these 2 gentlemen that took his life. And it just seems like this industry has got a lot of violence that's attached to it. And I think the entire industry needs possibly needs to take a step back and kind of look at what's going on.
Taking these allegations as true, of course, because I want to go through it. Because according to this affidavit, Davis and Francois, they teamed up to kill Lowell. And a detective reported that surveillance video inside the club shows the 2 walking around inside, stalking Grissom, and then Davis allegedly fires the shots. And then he runs outside and jumps into Francois' Mercedes-Benz. And authorities say, as if that wasn't enough evidence, Francois sends Davis a message on WhatsApp a few minutes after the shooting, before Davis ran outside, asking, "Where the F you at?" Now, according to police, Grissom was shot in the chest, he was shot in the abdomen, he was shot in the arms. He died 2 hours later at a trauma center, as I mentioned. And there has been no specific motive for the shooting, but authorities wrote in their affidavit that they believe the murder was a targeted attack with a gang nexus. You know, Colin, these kinds of attacks, let's say it's gang-related, in the open, with a lot of people around, is that a common characteristic?
Actually, I don't think so. Generally, they would be a little bit more discreet about achieving their objective. And it could be one of multiple things, but just to speculate, keeping in mind if these gentlemen are indeed the ones who did this, but it appears from the evidence they are, is that it's either a respect issue between 2 gangs or it comes down to money, you know, whether this person owed them money or was not an earner or didn't step up and do exactly what he was told he had to do.
But the surveillance footage, I mean, you commit it's very similar to, we're talking another case, the Lil Durk case, where he's accused of orchestrating a murder for hire plot. That was a shooting at a gas station, and so much of that is captured on surveillance tapes. You know, cars allegedly following another car, the shooters opening fire at the gas station. I mean, they have to know there's surveillance footage in the club, right?
Well, yes and no. You're dealing with people who are not quite the most sophisticated, and they're persons that are doing this that are guided by impulse or lack of impulse control. So just speculating, it appears to me that they had an objective, they were told, or they were the ones who wanted to do this, and they were going to get it done that night. And I'm sure there was some drugs or alcohol in their systems as well to kind of take the edge off. But to say that they did this to make a public statement, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just a matter of a couple of guys had an objective, and they didn't care about who, what, where, when. They just wanted to get it done.
And for Francois, that face tattoo, I imagine if people see him in the club, it's pretty identifiable.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is, I think they just had this veil of indestructibility. And when they went in there and to do this to the victim, and it really comes down to just the chaos that's in that industry, where they kind of all need to take a step back or be more careful, because I'm speculating, but the victim likely knew that he was going to be a target of some sort of violent attack, but just didn't take the proper precautions.
Let's talk about Francois for a second, because he was arrested pretty soon after the shooting, less than a week. It was in another county, but it was for a different reason. It was for a different incident. He'd been stopped in his Mercedes-Benz, which had a New Jersey license plate in nearby Broward County. And when the police asked him for his ID, he allegedly gives them a fake ID, a fake name. He bonds out on the fake name charge. He didn't show back up to court, so a Broward County judge signed a warrant for his arrest. And then in September of this year, an arrest warrant was issued out of Miami-Dade County for his arrest in connection with the nightclub shooting. And then he was booked into jail this past Wednesday. You know, I find it interesting that it took a little bit of time. It took a little bit of time to try to ultimately apprehend him. I mean, obviously, you hear a little bit of the legal history, but he wasn't arrested immediately after the shooting. Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it's a matter they had to find him. You know, they're likely looking for him, and then he popped up on this other warrant. And then, you know, through either fingerprint or his photograph or just cops talking to cops, they were able to piece the puzzle together and make sure he was brought into custody. And frankly, the law enforcement in South Florida is very good and very experienced with this kind of violent crime. So I'm sure they have their own little network per se between the detectives who talk and said, okay, we got a bad one. He might be in your county.
Talk about finding him. We actually looked him up, Guerby Francois, on Truthfinder. We put in his name and his location. Within seconds, Truthfinder had his details, including places he lived, where he worked, as well as his criminal history. And this background checker pulled up not only his current first-degree murder charge, but also the charges that he faces for allegedly giving police a fake name. And by the way, for everybody out there, as you can see, Truthfinder, really, really useful. Law&Crime, we partner with them. We use it to get details on the people involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, it can just be an excellent resource to kind of give you some peace of mind. It's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. So if you're interested right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports. You just got to go to truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. And by the way, with Francois, he's currently locked up without bond. When it comes to tracking down Davis, that was a little bit trickier, a little bit more complex. Why? He's actually a Canadian citizen, and he was wanted in Canada in connection with the kidnapping of a woman in Ontario. I'm talking about Elnaz Hajadaman, who was taken from a relative's home in January of 2022 by men wearing police gear. She was put into an SUV. She hasn't been seen since. It is believed that she's dead. And in fact, her ex-boyfriend, who had allegedly harassed her after their breakup, has been charged with her murder. So Davis, who also goes by the rap name Thorobread, was featured on the U.S. Marshals 15 Most Wanted Fugitive list, as well as Canada's 25 Most Wanted list. And authorities say that there was this lead from the Marshals Southern District of Florida office that led to Davis being found in Redway, California. This is a small town in the most northern part of the state. He's brought to Florida. He's locked up with no bond. In addition to his murder charge here in the U.S., he's also being held on an immigration warrant for Canada. Colin, as I said, that one's a little bit more complex. What do you take away from that when you're dealing with different agencies trying to find this guy?
Well, first step is the marshals. I was my first job in law enforcement was as deputy U.S. Marshal, and it's not. There's no argument. They are the best fugitive hunters in the world. So the fact that he jumped on their top 15, it doesn't surprise me that they were able to find him. And then secondly, it sounds like he was a violent criminal in Canada. He came down here to Florida, and then he started involved in the same stuff. And he may have been part of a hit crew or somebody that they hired to take care of this issue with this victim. So it shows you that when you have this level of violence, and then you also throw in the immigration side of this, which is very big in the media right now, law enforcement will rally around and get the job done.
The fact that he has a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement hold, how does that complicate this whole case?
It doesn't really. It's another method of holding him, and it's not hard to kind of waive that, or it'll stay in place until he finishes his sentence or his term here in the United States, which possibly could be life, and it's never going to go away. So those are very helpful for somebody who might be held on a DUI, and then they do their 40 or 50 days or 100 days, and then ICE comes in and deports them. So the detainer really isn't going to matter in this case.
And again, I think it appears right now that both Davis and Francois, they're charged with first-degree murder. Their arraignments are expected to happen in the next couple of weeks, so we're going to see how it shakes out. But do you anticipate that this could be a case where each of them is pointing the finger at the other?
I'm sure it already happened. I'm sure they're already, and once again, the law enforcement on there is very, very adept at this kind of stuff, and these two don't seem very sophisticated, so I'm sure they got them talking at some point, or at least using their phones to kind of incriminate each other.
Well, it's a really sad case. Again, the loss of a life like this, a senseless shooting like this, and the fact that they were able to apprehend the two suspects is a very big win for law enforcement. I imagine a big win for Grissom's family. So we'll see where this shakes up. But Colin Schmitt, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. Have a great weekend.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.